emotional response, I'll just call it that, I go measurable. So I start asking questions about measurable data.
Yes.
If I hear a lot of value words, bad job, unhappy, those things are value words. And so I say, well, you know, what was the budget number you intended to hit? You know, what kind of reports in it? What frequency would you have liked to have seen those?
Yes.
I want measurable data, and then I know for the next project what kind of measurable data they want, and I may have met the measurable data, but like you said, for some reason they're having a bad day and they're lashing out, but they're not giving any measurable. There's nothing I can correct if I don't know what it is, right?
Exactly.
And to just be hit with the emotions, and my younger self would have attacked back. My older self goes neutral. So that at the end of the day, when that person is reflecting, there was no response. I didn't call him a name. I didn't ask him about his bad day. I didn't make a comment about their marriage or whatever. But the young me wasn't like that, but the older me is, because I realize over many years that people do reflect on the way they acted. And they will come back and typically say, you know, I was out of line yesterday, or whatever, but if you take it and you make that situation worse by counterattacking, then it's just a terrible situation.
It is, and so project managers have an unbelievable. They really do have a huge burden. I mean, they have to play all these multiple roles, and they do have to play this sort of Dr. Phil's kind of. I don't know if I'm using that metaphor, overextending it, but they do have to kind of be the, you know, thinking through all these different perspectives and how to attack that. And I love that you said about measuring, because that uniformly is a great strategy to use with individuals like that, is to just be totally calm and say, well, let's set forth for going forward, you know, what frequency for this do we want? What are the trigger points when you want, you know, what are your like yellow flag moments, right? Or like, when should we have this what are the escalation steps that we want to take, and what are the triggers to get it escalated?
So now
let's put that in place.
Now you're talking about the tools of the trade. How do I run meetings? So for me, if you don't have an agenda for my meeting, we don't need to meet. If you can't come up with something for us to talk about, I don't need a meeting. And I don't always need a meeting face to face. We can do a conference call. If I'm driving out to Polytech and it's, you know, it's 2 hours out of my day, and it turns out I could have just called in, you didn't need me face to face, I'm going to call in, and I tell everybody that. Let's be efficient. Just because it's an hour meeting doesn't mean we need to meet an hour, you know. But that's not always the case in the bureaucratic environment. People scheduled an hour, and by golly, if we have to talk about your kids for 30 minutes first, that's what we're going to do, you know. And the second thing is, and this gets to your point about being measurable, I want meeting minutes because I want all our stuff memorialized, but more importantly, I want an action item log. And this has been something I did early in my career. I learned from a very good, very organized person. People leave a meeting and don't always know they have the ball, right? So I want to know what is it that we need, who's in charge of it, when do they have to have it by, and we're going to track it. And when things are tracked, they get done. I'm sure that's a project management, what do they call it?
An axiom.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of some geometry, a theorem, and postulate. It's the postulate, you know, if you measure it, it will get done. But it's true. Because at some point, people know that they have to be accountable. If there's no accountability, you're going to lose your project. You're going to lose what little control you have, the little control you think you have, you know. And so each of my meetings, I ask for an agenda. I ask for someone to take minutes. It doesn't have to be complicated. And it can even just be the action item log. We had a meeting. Here's what we decided. See you next week, or 2 weeks, or whatever, depending on the complexity of the project. And that has been a great tool. The other thing, and I don't know how many of your project managers know how to read blueprints, but in this business, you better know how to read a set of plans. It turns out architects aren't perfect, engineers aren't perfect, and contractors aren't perfect. And as the project manager, I go into a meeting, I know those documents. I know them frontward and backward. And if somebody says something, and it's kind of like, I probably shouldn't use a Bible thing, but if they say something and it's not in the documents, I need to know, hey, where did that come from?
Right.
And they say, oh, it's in the documents. Show me. because I've never seen that before. And so then you find out there were assumptions made when you're doing what the old school architects, which is who I learned from, they do something called redlining, and they look at their engineers' drawings and they say, hey, does that gas hot water heater have a vent? Does it have a drain? Is there power? Does the bathroom auto flusher have electric power to it? Does the water fountain? I can't how many water fountains they put in. There's no drain, or they didn't put power, and those are very common mistakes. And sometimes they're from engineering firms that are all three MP&E are all one area, and so a good project manager catches that stuff or says, "Oh, this is a beautiful drawing. How are you going to build it?" It's like an Escher drawing where they have the stairway that keeps going. A lot of times, and I know this for a fact because I also worked in an architecture firm, they hire these young guys. They're unbelievable on Revit and they're wonderful on CAD, but they put together a detail that you can't build in the real world. And the contractor needs to recognize that, and hopefully he will. But if you as the project manager can whatever you can catch is something that isn't going to be a problem on your project. Because I'll tell you when they're going to catch it, the day before they have to build it. And then it's going to be like, oh, now it's a change order, we don't have the material for that, and there's a lot of blaming usually. And architects don't handle blame well.
Right.
Contractors are far better at that.
Right.
And so I just think that skill set is really important. Organizational skills, time management skills, and understanding whatever project media or technology you're using, you need to be really good at it.
One idea about checking and doing that check before, like the gate check. Right. Like we're going to check all of our things before we go on to the next phase of the project.
I call it a page turn. Okay. And I make all of my capital project management people and architects come in front of me and we do a page turn and we walk through the whole project. Now I've already looked at it before we do that, but I want to be all on the same page, and if there's anything I've noticed or any kind of discrepancy, I want to solve it as a team.
Right, because in the IT world, because Eric, you were talking about him in the IT world.
Nick.
With Nick.
Yeah.
The kinds of quality control checks we would do before something could go on to the next stage, you would turn over your whole thing to a whole another group of people, and they would do a quality review check on it.
Third-party check.
Yep, and then they would write up the whole quality report on it, and then you'd get that back. And so that is a practice in the IT world, so that code doesn't get developed that doesn't, so you can catch those things. But that doesn't sound like that's as common a practice in the
we have a university
construction.
We have a university architect here. Hopefully this isn't going to be a negative comment. I've said for years, that's who should be looking at our drawings. They should rate the architectural drawings that we get, because we have all different kinds of architectural competencies. They should rate the quality of the work, the engineers, and how did it turn out. At the end of the project, get some type of rating. Currently, I'm told we don't do that because we don't have the manpower for it. There's so many things that are going on, we don't have the manpower. And this, again, is not necessarily a duty you would have to have as a project manager, but in all the years that I've done project management, it has been a necessary evil, if you want. When you're in a meeting and the contractor pulls out a set of plans and he flips it over and he shows you, you sort of have to know, well, okay, so typically architectural drawings, you have the big picture and then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller down in detail. And you need to know where those sheets are, where to look, how to pull up all the iterations of that, because you can have conflicting details. And just as project managers have different skill sets and architects have different skill sets and contractors have different skill sets, the more you can find ways to ask good questions. If you don't know exactly where that is, well, what was the detail? Well, what did the architect provide? Well, what's the missing link? You don't necessarily have to make a statement that you know what it is, but you have to know what questions to ask and who to ask. We kind of keep getting back to that. And understanding who is responsible for each portion of the project documents. And the ultimate responsibility for design is supposed to be on the architect. And that's why they have RFIs and ASIs. And I've noticed, especially here at ASU, they don't use the AIA documentation, American Institute of Architects, which had years and years of development for processes and ways of documenting the project properly, what I'll call properly legally. And so the RFI is a great tool because you get back an architectural supplemental instruction. Here's the drawing, here's the detail, here's how it goes together. And that is a wonderful way to track problems on a job. If you've got 200 RFIs on a small job, you know that the design team didn't do a great job. And I'll add, since I worked for several large architect firms, that's an actual strategy. You do kind of a cookie cutter set of drawings, and then you send a construction administrator from your team out there, and they solve the problems on the go. And it makes more money for the firm than trying to get all the documents perfect and then dealing with it out in the field. And so there are actually firms out there that strategize like that. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. They're out there to make money. That's what everyone's kind of doing, right? It's the same with material. If you don't know the difference between the different kinds of copper, and you go out there and you don't know the difference between a soft copper and a hard copper, and you paid for hard, you know, probably it's going to go on the ground, no one's going to notice. But that's a huge difference in cost. And I'm not saying that people are trying to be sneaky. I think there's a statement about, this is probably very inappropriately politically incorrect. Never blame on malice what can be blamed on stupidity.
Oh, right.
I don't think there's a lot of bad people out there. Everyone's doing the best that they can. And I hate to use the word stupid. Let's just say they weren't thinking that day, or you know, that's what was on the truck. Or I've heard lots of different excuses over the years. But I don't really, I mean, there's some bad people out there that try to cheat you, but they don't last long in this industry. And so typically it's just that they made a mistake. And so you just go to them and say, hey, you know, that's not the right copper, you know, or hey, we paid for the thicker metal here, or this is supposed to be whatever it is. And that, again, in the old days, I don't know how old, the architect was required to give a field report. They were required to inspect, and they were required to certify the pay document that it was installed per plans specifications. I don't hardly see that ever anymore.
Right.
Well, why? You know, what's so hard about that? Yeah, it costs a little more, but what's the end result? You get what you paid for. You get what was designed. And I think that there's and I can't explain this. I really don't. I don't have my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the outside world. I'm kind of in the ASU world now, this paradigm and how we act here. But I think that having good documentation, good field reports, and good inspection should be done by outside third party. I'm kind of trying to come back to where you were. I end up doing it because I've done it in the past, but not because that's part of project management. Right. It can be, and it's nice to be good at it, but it shouldn't be a necessary mandatory quality.
Right. Well, there's some really interesting things that can fall out when you take the project management practices from a field like IT and bring it into a field like construction management, because construction management, of course, it has been around for a lot longer than the IT field has, right? So, and there are some pieces like who's the architect in IT, right? Like that, and the architects, the artist renderings, and all of that, like that as a profession has its own, you know, things going on in that industry, right, that are impacting how they interact, and the individuals who are like wherever they are in their career trajectories in that field, who are interacting with the construction management projects, right? But when you kind of do like a parallel of like project management in the IT field and project management in the construction management field, there's some interesting things that come out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, kind of like we talked about, I think all project management is a people business. Lots of folks in IT tend to think that they're working with a machine and software and math. But then that might be true, but then they've lost contact with the people part of it. Right. And if you're really managing people. They're doing work, but you're managing, you know, their motivation, you know, their improvement. You know, I think, and I know a lot of IT people because there's about 17 of them right next door. They all want to do better, and they all want to move up. And the way that they move up isn't to program more.
Right.
It's typically to do more management.
Right. And and for me, in both of those fields, the project manager is focused on the client and what can we build out of this non-human stuff, whatever it is, whether it's code or whether it's building stuff. What can we build that can help the client achieve what they're trying to achieve?
Right.
And so you really have to understand the client and from lots of different perspectives of what is it they are trying to accomplish.
It's a lot like entrepreneurship. What you're the entrepreneur of, the product is not nearly as important as the running of the business.
Yes.
And same with project management. Whether your product is a building or a you know, a set of software or whatever it is, you're managing that.
Yes.
And you have a set of goals and a set of criteria and a set of measurables, and you're managing that to a completion. And so there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of management skill that works for both.
Absolutely.
The knowledge base is different, and the specifics.